to News Center. I'm Archana Solanki. Here are the top headlines we're tracking this evening. Stock markets tread with caution across the world ahead of the US Fed rate decision. Sensex and Nifty end with minor gains. A CNBC survey shows Wall Street is expecting a 50 basis point rate hike tonight. Finance Minister promises to stick to the fiscal glide path, tells Parliament government will achieve 6.4% fiscal deficit by FY23 and is on course to achieve 4.5% deficit by FY26. BSNL to get more than 60,500 crore rupees through the supplementary demands for grants. 17 opposition parties walk out of Parliament in protest after being denied a discussion on the rising tensions with China. Sources say old videos of Indian and Chinese forces clashing at the border are circulating on social media. These videos are not related to the December 9th clash in Arunachal Pradesh. Infosys co-founders gather to mark 40 years since its inception. Nandan Nilekani, who's currently the non-executive chairman of Infosys, says he will pass the baton to someone who's not among the co-founders of the company, wants Infosys to be a no-drama, high-relevance company without bureaucratic cholesterol. Senior government officials say that the FIR into the AIM server attack highlights that the hack originated from China, adds that 5 physical servers out of 40 were successfully infiltrated. Officials say that data in the server have been retrieved now. Paytm approves a share buyback proposal of up to 850 crores, fails to cheer investors. The maximum share price fixed at 810 rupees, a 50% premium, offers little solace. The company says it expects the process to be completed within 6 months. The stock slumps 3%. United Nations agency ICAO refutes SpiceJet's claim, clarifies that its visit to operators was not to audit or inspect, but to verify the effectiveness of the Civil Aviation Authority's safety oversight. SpiceJet had previously claimed that an ICAO audit had found its operation system and safety processes to be in order. The bankrupt crypto exchange FTX committed old-fashioned embezzlement, says John Ray. The new CEO appointed to resurrect the company in a 4-hour hearing before the U.S. lawmakers. FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried is staring at more than 100 years in prison if convicted of fraud. On to the day's trading action. The Wall Street ends the day with minor gains ahead of the U.S. Fed's outcome. Nifty and Sensex ended 0.25% higher. Banks led from the front with that index posting a record close for the second day in a row to rise above that 44,000 mark. Mid-caps also outperformed. The U.S. Federal Reserve will announce its final rate decision for this year later tonight. As per a survey conducted by CNBC, the market is bracing for a 50 basis point hike in benchmark rates. What's crucial, however, is Fed chief's post-conference commentary and the projections going forward. CNBC's Steve Leisman gets us the highlights from the latest CNBC Fed survey.
The Fed is seen hiking 50 basis points at the meeting this week and adding another 75 next year, and causing what 2/3 of the respondents to the CNBC Fed survey believe will be a recession. But there is a small contingent, we'll look at that in a second, that's optimistic a contraction of the economy can be avoided. Here are what we call the Fed expectations. 50 this week. The new rate is going to be 4.25 to 4.5. The peak rate is seen at 5.15. That's higher than the Fed funds futures market. So this group of 34 folks think they're going to be a more aggressive Fed. The final hike comes in April, and then the Fed cruises at that speed, at that rate for 9 months. Here's the outlook from this group. 388 now goes to 438. That's between 4.25 and 4.5. 5.15 is the peak rate. And then some adjusting going on towards the end of the year, and maybe some rate cuts through 2024, ending at 380 for December 2024. Here's the recession outlook. 61% think there's going to be a recession in the next year. The average start date is in June of 2023. That is, by the way, 2 months later than the prior survey. And we've seen that in some of the Wall Street forecasts, pushing it down the road. Average length is a pretty long one, 15 months, with 67% believing it will be moderate, and about 33% think it's going to be mild. Here's the GDP outlook, and you can see 2 quarters of negative growth built in Q2 and Q3 of next year. Again, that's a quarter later for the 2 negative quarters there. But here's a little bit of optimism here. Does the Fed tighten too much, we ask, and cause a recession? That's 59%. Sorry, that's down from 71%. Is it just right? And there's that contingent of optimists right there. 24% think the Fed gets it just right. That's up from 9%. It had been higher in the past. And does the Fed tighten too little and not get inflation under control? 15% down from 20. So a little bit more optimism in there. Recession, though, remains the base case for most of the 34 respondents.
All right, a quick programming alert. Get the CNBC edge on the FOMC decisions. Our coverage on the crucial Fed decision starts at 11 tonight. Moving on, opposition parties staged a walkout from Rajya Sabha today after the demand for a discussion on the face-off between Indian and Chinese troops at the line of actual control earlier this month was rejected by the chair. Finance Minister promises to stick to the fiscal glide path. She told Parliament that the government will achieve 6.4% fiscal deficit by FY23 and is on course to achieve 4.5% deficit by FY26. The government-owned telecom company BSNL gets infusion worth 60,575 crore rupees via the supplementary demands for grants.
Fiscal deficit was estimated to reduce from 6.9% of GDP in the last year's RE to 6.4% of GDP in the current year's BE. This is very much in line with the government's commitment to achieve fiscal consolidation announced in the budget of 21-22. That is to reduce the fiscal deficit to a reasonable level till 25-26. And the current situation also very clearly gives me that kind of a feeling that we'll be able to comply with what we have said in the budget. Inflation has come and it is now come down and it is now in the tolerable band of the RBI. Inflation has been declining since April 2022 and it is declining further. CPI for November 2022 came down to 5.88% year on year, down from 6.77 in October. So I want that taken cognizance of.
It's been 40 years since the inception of Infosys. The OG of Indian startups, N.R. Narayan Murthy, along with 5 others, started the company in 1982 by borrowing 10,000 rupees from his wife Sudha Murthy. Now, Infosys is valued at more than $16 billion. The founders of Infosys gathered in Bengaluru to mark the 40th anniversary. Shireen Bhan spoke to the founders as they took a trip down the memory lane. Nandan Nilekani, who's currently the non-executive chairman of Infosys, says that he'll pass the baton to someone who's not among the co-founders of the company. He wants Infosys to be a no-drama, high-relevance company without bureaucratic cholesterol, in his words.
I do have this huge responsibility. Because going back to his phrase of 2006, I'm the last of the jokers left.
Do you miss having the other jokers around?
Oh, yeah. It's no one to talk to. I only talk to Salil, but Salil is so busy selling that I can't talk to him also. So I think my challenge is a little more acute because, since I have some founders clout and all that, I can do some. But I'll be handing over to a chairman at whatever point that I exit from the scene, who will be the first, not the first, but a non-founder. And now there's no plan B now. If I hand over to somebody and it doesn't work out, there's no plan B. I can't come back at some 75 or something. So, and I don't think any of these guys want to come back either. So
maybe we should ask them.
You can ask them. Maybe they want to come back. They haven't told me. So anyway, I think so there's no plan B. So I have to make sure that when I exit the scene, I implement his vision of putting in place the leadership structure, people, and with the right values to take it forward. So that's really actually the biggest thing on my head.
And that's a serious issue. And I want to get you to comment on what you just said, Nandan, because as you pointed out, you said there is no plan B. Yeah. In light of what has happened previously, what is it that you believe needs to be put in place to ensure that you get it right? Because this has been a challenge. Let's be clear about that. And secondly, do you believe that in hindsight, and I want to ask each one of you, and Mr. Murthy, I want to ask you as well, that this hard coding that at 60 you need to move away, at 60 you need to retire, at 60 it is the sunset. Do you believe in hindsight today that maybe it should have been different?
No, I mean, look, if not 60, maybe 65. All that is fine. But look, at the end of the day, we're all mortal, right? We're not going to be around. And that's one of the reasons why we're having the 40th is we don't know whether they're there for the 50th. So, really, seriously, I'm not joking. Let's get this done because I don't know what's going to happen 10 years from now. So, you have to, how do you create institutions that outlive you? How do you create institutions that cross generations? How do you create institutions that move from an ownership model to a totally professional model? In fact, when we first began, Murthy said, we will be the ultimate professionals company. I remember our first tagline was professionals company. But what you realize now is that, you need to have a combination of, professional ownership, all that stuff. So I think it's not clear to me what's going to happen.
It's not clear to you what's going to happen. That's
I
not very reassuring to hear.
No, I haven't found yet a person whom I can hand off to. Let's put it that way.
What is the timeline that you're giving yourself?
I'm not going to talk here.
Okay, all right. I tried.
I've always said that I'll be here as long as required. If you remember my first statement, I'll be here as long as required. At the same time, I don't want to be here that long. I'm certainly not looking at, 50th anniversary kind of situation. I'm not even sure whether I'll be alive at that time. So the point is this, that, but I do have a huge responsibility because when I came, I could come. So I was there. I was just floating around, but I was there somewhere in the scene. But I can't say that tomorrow, right? So we have to make sure that it's done well. And then it perpetuates after that too. It's not just one transition, right? So we have to put a system where there's perpetual transitions, both of the chairman and the CEO. And, every chairman-CEO combination should have the same kind of trust and working relationship that Salil and I have. Now, that's a hard ask to think ahead that much because it's all about human beings and so on. But that's my goal. But I certainly don't want to be there longer than necessary.
And it's time for a short break. But coming up next, FTX has committed old-fashioned embezzlement, says John Ray, the new CEO appointed to resurrect the company. More on this when we return. Stay tuned.
Change is the only constant in today's world. To win in unpredictable markets, beat inflation, and protect your finances from geopolitical risks, you need to build a volatility-proof portfolio. And that's why we're back with Nawab and the Wizard. Watch Ramesh Damani in conversation with influential market veterans as they share their insights and analysis of the complex world order, the future of investing, and building a portfolio for an ever-changing world. Wizards of the Street at these times.
Welcome back. The bankrupt crypto exchange FTX committed old-fashioned embezzlement, says John Ray, the new CEO appointed to resurrect the company in a 4-hour hearing before U.S. lawmakers. FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried is staring at more than 100 years in prison if convicted of fraud. Silva Hinao joins us with the latest. Silvana, what are you picking up?
Sam Bankman-Fried remains behind bars in the Bahamas this morning after the magistrate overseeing his case there denied a petition by Bankman-Fried's legal team to set bail at $250,000. Now, the court calling the disgraced FTX founder a, quote, great flight risk, ordering him to remain in custody until at least February 8th. Now, this comes after U.S. authorities officially charged Bankman-Fried with 8 counts, including conspiracy to commit wire fraud on customers and lenders, money laundering, and violations of campaign finance laws. When asked if more charges against other FTX-connected players are possible, U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Damian Williams, said his team is not done yet. Bankman-Fried faces decades in prison if convicted. As Bankman-Fried's future hangs in the balance, so too does that of FTX. On Capitol Hill yesterday, the firm's new CEO slamming the company's lack of oversight and lack of controls in the front of the House Financial Services Committee.
This is really old-fashioned embezzlement. This is just taking money from customers and using it for your own purpose. Not sophisticated at all. Sophisticated perhaps in the way they were able to sort of hide it from people, frankly, right in front of their eyes. But this isn't sophisticated whatsoever. This is just plain old embezzlement.
Brian, and it's day 2 of the hearings, and they will be taking place in front of the Senate Banking Committee today.
All right, moving on. Chief Economic Advisor V. Anand Nageshwaran has said that the government is on track to achieving lower inflation that has been projected by the RBI. Speaking to my colleague Ritu Singh, the Chief Economic Advisor said that IIP numbers tend to get adjusted in the later months, and he said that wouldn't read much into them. The IIP for the month of October contracted by 4%, coming in at a 26-month low.
These numbers are not seasonally adjusted and they do tend to get revised later. So I wouldn't read too much into one numbers, because we should also look at the fact that purchasing managers index numbers are quite strong, both in manufacturing and in services, and credit growth to all sectors, including industry, is growing at double digits. So I wouldn't be reading too much into one number.
And what about the inflationary front? Just the last question. It's finally come down below 6%, the upper tolerance limit of RBI's inflation band. But WPI is also, eased after several months. What is your reading? We've seen the worst of it. Is further action really warranted at this point of time in terms of rate hikes before we see the past actions really materialize?
No, I wouldn't comment on the monetary policy action. That I leave it to the central bank. Inflation, I mean, RBI has made its own projections, and they do take into consideration their own projections and in terms of what policy stance they would take. So therefore, that is completely in their domain. But as far as inflation is concerned, I think RBI's forecasts themselves suggest that they will be coming off the highs that we saw this year, and we are on track to achieve that.
Moving on, India's micro, medium and small industries have been struggling for the last few years. Measures like the Emergency Credit Line Guarantee Scheme have had limited success in streamlining their revival. CNBC-TV18's Jessilia Parambil and Arundhati Ramanan report that a pre-budget meeting with the Finance Minister players have put simpler processes for accessing funds at the top of their wish list.
Weak credit scores. MSMEs say this is one of the biggest stumbling blocks when it comes to them accessing funds from banks and other institutions. And they've asked the Finance Minister for help in this area. Specifically, they want a new rating system that will not score MSMEs, especially unlisted MSMEs, like every other creditor.
We suggest them to change norms for unlisted companies who actually want to do the credit rating. And because of this credit rating, you can check with the private bankers. They always have their own checklist. They are not rely on the credit rating checklist, or they don't ask companies to go for the credit rating. So this is the major issue because all nationalized banks, they ask for this credit ratings.
Even 2 years since the pandemic-triggered restrictions were lifted, MSMEs are struggling to recover. They've been hit by multiple shocks. The government has told Parliament that as of July this year, 10,000 MSMEs have shut shop completely between 2019 and 2022, against just 400 that went out of business in the preceding 3 years. Increasingly, more and more MSMEs have had to borrow money to keep their heads above water. Experts say this increased dependence on credit is likely to continue through the coming year as well.
Today, we are in a rather delicate situation where the Indian economy, while doing better than most of the other countries, has definitely registered a slowdown. So in this kind of a situation, I don't see the SMEs actually leading the way as far as the Indian economy is concerned. It will be more of a kind of a supportive nature which are required. And therefore, the kind of credit or kind of funding which is required will be more for existence, for survival.
A report by CRISIL says that 43% of MSMEs by value are expected to remain below pre-pandemic levels in terms of earnings before interest, tax and margin this fiscal. This is largely due to their inability to pass on rising input costs and unfavorable exchange rates to customers. In particular, pain are players in sectors like chemicals, dairy processing and bulk drugs.
There is an excessive price pressure when we are selling the product because most of the global companies are piled up with inventory and they want to get rid of the stocks. So on one side there is no demand and on the other side there is a huge inventory. As a result, there is a huge price pressure on us.
Some of these sectors also hope the government will offer help in the form of lower interest rates and restoring access to a wider market.
In this tough period, we are expecting some benefits from government. They have stopped the export incentives. So if they start it for the time being, it will be very, very great help to industry. And also the interest rate which they have jacked up, if they bring it down, then survival of those industries which have just started up, it will be very, very helpful.
MSMEs have also asked the Finance Minister for export-oriented trade incentives, a revival or extension of schemes aimed at easing liquidity and measures to boost demand, from a greater share in public procurement to a procurement approach that puts quality over price. In Mumbai, with Jasilia K, Arundhati Ramanan.
The deadlock between Jet Airways lenders and the Jalan Kalrock consortium continues, with both sides approaching courts seeking action. The JKC has moved the NCLT seeking transfer of ownership of the airline. However, banking sources tell CNBC-TV18 that ownership transfer will only be possible after JKC makes first tranche of payments to creditors, fulfills the conditions precedent and complies with the NCLT order. Madiha Mujawar is here to give us more details about this standoff. Madiha, what is the latest?
Well, both the lenders and the Jalan Kalrock consortium are communicating their stances through NCLT and NCLAT. Let me first tell you about JKC's plea before the NCLT. The consortium is seeking two things: transfer of airlines ownership, and second, making ownership transfer date as the start of the 180-day deadline to pay creditors. In a separate appeal, lenders have moved the NCLAT, urging the tribunal to expunge its observations in an order passed on 21st October. The NCLAT had observed that Jalan Kalrock consortium have met conditions precedent committed in the resolution plan. Now, lenders have told the tribunal that if this observation is not deleted, it will put them, the lenders, to irreparable harm, loss and injury. The lenders have also clarified to the court that JKC has not met all the conditions precedent. Now, we asked banking sources on what lies ahead for the relaunch of the Jet Airways on the back of these differences. They say ownership of the airline will only be transferred after JKC makes the first tranche of payment and fulfills all the conditions precedent. Sources also say that lenders have never stopped JKC from infusing funds into the airline, but JKC has itself failed to show it has the funds for infusion. Sources also say that JKC wants to use 300 crore rupees received by Jet as rent from Air Serbia and others as working capital. Now, lenders have opposed their demand as they feel the money belongs to them and not the consortium. They want JKC to infuse its own money for working capital. Lenders also say it's a loss-making situation for them as they also have to pay over 250 crore in airport dues.
And with that, it's a wrap. Stay tuned to CNBC-TV18 for more news and updates.